we have most people in. I want to be conscious of everyone's time. So welcome everyone. Welcome to our very first fireside chat. And we're hoping that you all received your box of wine and cheese, hopefully to enjoy, or non-alcoholic. If you haven't, we will make sure you get one after this event, if you did like to have one. I'm Kim Paradise. I'm the Chief of Staff here at Mindgrub. I'm also head of the cybersecurity practice. And we're so glad that you all were able to join us today to discuss strategies for building a strong cybersecurity talent pipeline. Before I turn it over to the host, I just wanted to make sure we had a few housekeeping notes. First, a quick reminder that this is a webinar and it's being recorded. So I hope you are all okay with that, because we will have some post-event edits, and we'll give you the full length of this entire recording at the end, including a blog post, so you'll have it if you do want to share it with anyone that you know. And then secondly, we really want to make this an interactive discussion. The last thing any of us want to have is another like Zoom meeting where we're all just sitting here staring at each other. But it's truly meant, I mean, everyone was personally invited to this event to be able to have a very high level discussion around this topic, because I think that there's a lot that we can discuss and hopefully take away some interactive and some tangible takeaways that each of you can bring to your own organizations, and hopefully meet each other, and maybe there's some, you know, sharing of ideas that you can follow up with after the event. So really hoping it will be more of that type of feel. And if you do have a question, or you want to raise your hand, or you want to, you know, sort of add to the discussion, we would love for you just to hit the reactions button at the bottom and hit raise your hand, and then unmute yourself. So hopefully you'll all be muted during it, during this opening, and then we'll just call on you and just state your name and which company you're from. Instead of us going through introductions of everyone, we'd like to just do it like that as we're going along, so we don't take too much time in the beginning. So with that, I will hand it over to our CEO of Mindgrub, Mr. Todd Marks, to do the introductions from here. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, Kim. It's good to see everybody out tonight. I'm Todd Marks, the CEO and founder of Mindgrub. I've got the pleasure of introducing our guest tonight. Just before I do, just some quick words about Mindgrub. We're a full services agency and consultancy headquartered in Baltimore. We've expanded nationally the last couple years. We have an office in downtown DC, offices in New York and Philadelphia. A lot of you, you'll notice, are from Northern Virginia. So I happen to be the chair of the Maryland Technology Council. And so I'm north of the Potomac. I oversee a lot of the advocacy and STEM education, workforce development, affinity programs for both tech and life sciences. I've gotten very interested as both the Maryland Tech Council chair and Mindgrub CEO of looking at what's happening on the south side of the Potomac. So you'll see Jennifer here tonight. She's the CEO of the Northern Virginia Tech Council. We have a lot of other Northern Virginia people in the audience. Thank you very much. It's nice to meet you. We now have a number of employees in the Northern Virginia area. As soon as COVID hit, we were able to basically take the governor off the business and stop having to hire just in the greater Baltimore area. We had some DC talent, but now we grew about 60 to 70 employees over this past about 10 months. We're about 175. We have an agency business, consultancy business, emerging technology. We build a lot of software. We're in a lot of different industries. So we build Exelon's mobile apps, Under Armour's apps. I saw Drakos here tonight. We've been working with them for a while. And so it's a lot of organizations, but we do a lot in cyber. And as Kim said, she really is our engagement director in the cyber industry, but we built Dark Web ID and ID Agent, built their software. We've done a number of websites and marketing and interactive media dashboards. So there is a lot we can help you with. And we're just here. We really want to get to know a lot of you. We're expanding quite a bit. We have a lot of talent in Dallas and Austin. We kind of call it the big banana. We've started to grow through the Appalachians, and we're kind of expanding. We work on Entergy, we're building their mobile app in New Orleans, and then we get into Austin and Dallas, where we have a number of customers, some of which are our cyber customers, where we're building their software. But it's great to know you. A lot of you in Northern Virginia. We're looking at office space in Herndon. I love to renovate space, so we just renovated another. We're in the process of renovating another space in Pigtown in South Baltimore, which is going to be our innovation lab. We're moving our robotics programs, our drone programs. We're going to move our warehousing. We have a marketplace at Mindgrub, and we also have IT functions. We're going to move those to the warehouse. But we love like old, reclaimed warehouse space that we can make really funky. We also have renovated some old restaurants. So we have the Mind Pub, which is a bar on Ford Ave. We turned it into event space. We actually have a ghost kitchen there. But Herndon. I'd love to be in Tyson's. I probably can't afford it though. But so Herndon and points west. So let me know. I'd love to network with each of you as the weather gets nicer. I'm definitely interested in that area. All right, so enough from me. And we got a little survey to do too, but let me introduce you to Andy. We're going to do a quick survey because we've got a couple topics that we think are really timely topics right now. And before we get to the survey though, let me introduce you to Andy. So Andy Bonillo is a client of ours. We work with Ciena, where he's the Chief Information Security Officer. And we do some web and marketing for them. Hope to do a little bit more on the cyber front here. But Andy oversees a dedicated, diverse team of cybersecurity experts. And they focus on trust and preparedness, cyber risk management, cybersecurity operations, security remediation, architecture, and strategy. Andy is globally recognized for information security as an executive, and he has helped shape the strategic and operational visions for over 150 Fortune 5000 companies. Prior to his private sector career, Andy served as a special agent with the United States Secret Service, where he led the largest cybercrime investigation in U.S. history and was awarded the Distinguished Service Award from the United States Attorney General. His entrepreneurial endeavors include being the co-founder of Task Force 7 Technologies, Inc., a company focusing on building the world's premier professional cybersecurity social network, as well as a co-host of Task Force 7 Radio, LLC, the voice of cybersecurity, a weekly radio show on cybersecurity topics on the Voice of America Business Channel. All right, so just a quick applause for Andy. Thank you for coming out and speaking today. Before I turn it over to him, we talked and we thought there was a few topics that would be of interest. So we're going to open up a poll here, and we want to get you to vote on them. We're going to put them in priority order. So we have attracting and retaining and growing teams. That seems to be a hot topic here. We have the skills gap for cybersecurity professionals, diversity in our industry, and employer brand. If you could weigh in on those, I'll give you just a minute here. Which ones would you like to hear from? All right, we'll give it 10 more seconds. All right, Jen, if you could reveal the poll here. All right, so it looks like we have the skills gap as number 1, attracting, retaining, and growing teams, diversity, number 3, and employer brand for number 4. All right, and Andy, I nailed it, but I swear I didn't rig it.
Yeah, I know. Before on the break, he was like, oh, I think I figured it out. I'm like, I don't know, man. We'll see.
I nailed it.
Well, look,
Right,
I appreciate Todd, Kim. I appreciate you having me. Everybody, I appreciate dedicating an hour of your time to hanging out with me and your commitment to leadership. Right? I mean, that's the real key, right, to all the people that men and women that you lead. I've been very privileged in my career to have some really great leaders. I've also had some awful leaders through my journey. And so hopefully we always take the good and leave the bad as we learn from the bad, right? For me, as I look at, attracting, retaining, and growing teams, we'll dive into some strategies I'd like to use. But for me, leadership is kind of boils down to, I like to call it, it's a G thing for me. There's five things I typically like to focus on there, right? Number one, you got to be grateful, right? The men and women that put their career and or life, depending on what you're leading, in your hands, right? And it's true privilege to be able to be chosen by them to do that. And I think as you start to think about how you're going to attract talent, your brand around how grateful you are really is important, right? And putting them as your number one operating priority. The second thing I like to focus on is being genuine. For me, I've got to be able to be myself. I need to allow them to be themselves, and create an environment and a culture that's going to enable them to thrive. Um, the pandemic has obviously certainly created some challenges for folks in different ways. And so depending on how you manage your teams and the flexibility you give leading up to the pandemic will probably have stress tested that culture and that leadership style, depending. We're glad to dive into some of that as well. I'd love to get all of your thoughts on some things that you've experienced that went really well for you or have not. The other G I like to focus on is giving, giving of your time, your knowledge, your whole self. And then when times get tough or whatever, make sure some gifts don't hurt either, right? Sending them something that's thoughtful and personal. I think send stuff, even if you send stuff to like their family, right? Say, hey, thanks for putting up with me while your mom or dad are working really long hours on this crazy project, right? So just little things that try to separate, you from probably the day to day, in terms of how you give yourself to your team. I like to get in there, right? I come from a small team dynamics, so for me, as high as you get in the executive ranks, right, you still want to feel like you're still part of the team, even though you can't fully always be there at the same you were when you started out. But I like them to know that I'm not afraid to get in there, get my hands dirty, and be a part of, solving the tough problems right alongside them. And then the last thing, is being gritty, right? And just not being afraid to grind it out with them. Like you've got to be like the first in, last out kind of mentality. It's good to see you on the call, Chris. Congrats on your new role. It's been a long time, brother. Can't wait to catch up offline. But I know you have a lot of background in this type of space too. Dr. Allen, I saw your background. Everybody appreciate taking the time. In terms of attracting talent, for me, it really started like earlier in my career with building your own personal brand and really building, kind of a pipeline of talent and recognizing talent early on. I've hired folks, like I'll cold call people that I haven't seen in 4, 5, 6 years and say, hey, remember that time we met in the cafeteria? You probably don't remember, but I know who you're mentored by. I know what you've been doing. I've been following your career for the last 5 years. What do you say? You want to come work for me? Right. And I think putting that personal touch on like people knowing that you've been tracking them, you've maintained that relationship, you've kept an eye on them as they've navigated their own career, like is a really thoughtful way for them to realize that you value them as people, you recognize something in them as an individual, that they stood out to you for some reason, and you always kept them in top of mind, which has enabled me to hire fast for companies as I go to build organizations. Like my last role at AIG, I had to hire 50 people in 8 months to build out a full capability. And it was a board level commitment. It's like, man, how do you do that without, like, HR can't move that fast, recruiting firms can't move that fast, right? You better know some people that you can pull in that want to come work for you and bring their friends into an environment because they're putting their name and their relationship on it, right? So, to me, it starts very early on in building that real deep personal connection and really being present in those conversations with folks and seeing who they're connected to, who they talk to, who they're mentored by. Did they say that one thing that was really smart that you picked up on and held on to? So those are some of the things that I've been doing over the course of my career in terms of, like, paying attention to people and how they stand out and what those little characteristics that you care about that they have, and try to keep a database of those folks, so when you can pick up the phone and try to recruit them really quick. At the end of the day, attracting talent in our space is really stealing talent, right? I mean, there's 0% unemployment rate in cybersecurity. So you've got to be the place and the leader they want to follow, and you've got to have a place and a really interesting mission for them to want to get behind for the most part. Typically, I like to talk to them about the growth opportunities that they have. And even if you're a mature organization or you're walking into a mature organization, there's still opportunities typically for some sort of growth or transformation, and typically an opportunity to treat it like a startup. And I feel like that's been treating these opportunities and bringing people in like that they can come in and be a part of something meaningful and grow it and put their own stamp on it and maybe do it better than the way they did it before and learn from those previous experiences helps me retain folks and grow teams quickly because they feel like it's always this entrepreneurial kind of background. Now, that being said, right, I spent 10, 12 years in the US government, and that's a completely different dynamic, but I always found opportunities to find those innovative niches where I could still do the same type of entrepreneur type of projects. And in the Secret Service, it affords you that flexibility because you move roles a lot and the dynamic nature of the mission. But not everyone has that luxury if you're, on a 3-year contract in a SOC and you're sitting at a desk every day. And so, but I would say, look to identify the people that kind of gravitate towards those stretch assignments or those innovative type things, or asking questions around how do we make this better? How do we stretch this a little differently? How do we stress test it a little differently, that are thinking really inquisitively around the problems they're working on, because those are the ones that you'll have to make sure you keep them, constantly thirsty, right? They're the ones that'll get bored easy, that are probably your best talent. They're the ones that are going to be able to slot into stretch assignments that will enable them to, or you to grow in a way that you didn't even think you could take that assignment or that mission and or that outcome. So to me, those are the things, like, instead of trying to tamper down that enthusiasm, right, which will create morale issues and other things, try to foster that in an environment, even when it's not necessarily the culture across the entire environment that you're in. But if you can foster those smaller pockets of innovation, even in larger bureaucracies, you'll find that you'll be able to retain those folks a lot longer. I think you need to be realistic too about their growth and what is the right thing for them and right thing for your team. When I manage and lead folks, I am genuinely interested in their long-term success. Even though I'm managing a capability or an outcome for my organization, if someone becomes unhappy in their current role, right, and they've kind of peaked, you almost want to get ahead of that and say, hey, look, maybe we can find you a new role in a different place, and you could be the CISO instead of, I'm not leaving anytime soon. So if you need to make another change for yourself and your family, maybe that's the right decision for them and ultimately your team, because then they're not hanging on too long. I think, in terms of growing the teams, business cases is a very underutilized tool. I think a lot of times in cyber, we focus on the tech and we focus on some of the problems we're trying to solve, and we don't speak the language of business all the time. And the sooner you can do that and make cyber a business problem and communicate it in business terms, your ability to grow your capabilities and grow your teams and have the resources to train your people on the cool things, give them more tech to play with, send them to more training, build your head count, et cetera, all comes down to articulating the need to solve a problem that's going to be valuable for your business. So
I have a quick question, Andy, before you move on, because you're speaking my language here. We just pivoted to having a center of excellence focus, solution focus, talking business with our teams. Yeah. So absolutely. But your point right before that, you were talking about reviews and looking over career paths and making sure you're truly invested in your employees. And we just got into this debate. What's your cadence of reviews? and increases? How often, how frequent do you give reviews? How often, how frequent do you give increases?
So it depends on what's going on in the business, right? In terms of how much flexibility you have in your budget to play with the increases. There's typically 2 points in the year, end of year, mid-year. But I like to have the flexibility to kind of, reach out and hook people up when I can. So, if you're in an environment where you only got like 1 or 2 chances throughout the year, like that's fine. I try to find ways to do it throughout the year with my own budget. And so, you know, the reviews themselves, I've got weekly one-on-ones with all of my leadership team. In terms of formal reviews, we actually don't do them because we are tracking towards that constant communication to understand what's going on with them. So if you're waiting to have a conversation with them about what they want to do in 6 months and then another one in another 6 months, I personally feel like you're missing the boat just because I want to know what's going on with them right now. So I would say the cadence is weekly, if not more than that, which requires a lot of your time, right? And so, but it's that commitment to them and that they feel like they're in the know of what's going on strategically for the team, where they fit, and what opportunities they can consistently think about going to. The challenge with that, I'll say, is that depending on their personality type, and how they consume information, when you tell them something strategically down the road, that may be like a year and a half, 2 years, they may think, well, is that going to happen in 2 months, 6 months, right? So you got to be very cautious about how you set those expectations. Another thing that I do with my team is we talk about communication, right? Storytelling, and the soft skills. So it's one thing to grow them in their development or what opportunities they may have financially or for growth in positions, but it's what are the skills needed to continue to enhance their career. One of the things that I've been very fortunate to have is have a coach. I've had multiple coaches in different roles, and I find that is something that doesn't happen lower enough in organizations and early enough in people's career. And so I'm trying to constantly find ways to give people access to those types of resources as earlier in their career as possible, whether it's mentorship, innovation meetings with me, brainstorming sessions, like whatever we can do to give them more access to folks like ourselves who are on this call, so we can, really think and share that knowledge, so you're not just sharing it with, the top people in your organization. In terms of diverse thought, diversity in general, right? Constantly trying to find ways to bring in new perspectives into the organization. One thing I do, and I just did it recently with my team, is brought in a coach that I use personally, and we ran for my leadership team. We ran personality testing. It's a thing called Type Coach, is a tool we use. My coach is Jennifer Selby Long. She's pretty cool. I could connect you with her if you guys are looking. But what we do is we brought Jennifer in, and once everyone's personality was defined, kind of look up on a grid and say, okay, where does everybody fit? So when you're in a meeting and you say, how come this person isn't getting what I'm saying? Like, why are they pushing back on me? Like, right? You don't really understand like why you're not breaking down that barrier. But when you understand their personality and how they communicate and how they accept information and how they're viewing what you're saying to them, then you can start to communicate a different way. So my leadership team, we actually do that and have exercises so that we understand how we look at it. And we actually have a dashboard that we can go into a portal and look at and see, all right, that meeting didn't go well, so I got to go back and look up Andy's personality so I know. And it gives you tips on actually how to frame a conversation with me, right? So things like that kind of help you, give people the skills, make them successful, make you an attractive leader to want to work for, show them that they care, and then of course, tactically, you got to get in there and get your hands dirty with them. So for me, it's those 5 Gs: genuine, get in there, giving, gritty, and grateful, because it's a privilege to lead. So I'll pause there and maybe open it up for some questions on things folks want to dive into.
The one question I had for you on the diversity, we've been looking at within the cyber talent, kind of the dimensionality of neurodiversity, especially as you're really trying to get them. Have you had any explorations or success in figuring out how to get that
So
as
I guess
part
the
of it?
best way to say it is so probably only in the environment, right? Not necessarily a specific person, right? And what I'm finding, and if you're looking to dive into that, is you got to have an environment that's accepted of, right, individuals that may be different, right? And I think that ultimately comes down to it with anybody, right? And I think the value of how people process information there. So I haven't had any personal experiences yet. We've explored the concept of trying to do it. And I think really it's making sure you have the right environment for anyone to feel comfortable in. I'll be honest, this is probably the most dressed up I've been at work. I'm sure you're all probably, what do I wear tonight? Now we've all been at home, right? And I'm finding that, the environment we've created now virtually is completely different than what we had in person. All the stress and anxiety for folks, typically in cyber, that are maybe a little more introverted, have traditional personalities, right? That anxiety of being in a social room with somebody has gone away. So you're getting more productivity out of folks, I think, because of the environment that we create virtually, because they're in the luxury of their own home. So I think that also creates and affords, you know, maybe folks that are traditionally considered to be have disabilities, that have really talented minds that can add a lot to the space. The luxury of being in an environment that's probably a little closer to what they're used to as a corporate norm, as opposed to before. So I'm hoping we're going to be able to make some strides there.
Hey, Andy, one question, because I saw Peter pop in from Drakos. He had asked earlier, and Peter, what you missed is Andy said that we have a shortage of talent in cyber, and really to recruit, you have to poach. So I know you put in the question, where do you find your marketing talent? So Andy, specifically for marketing talent, those that are savvy in cyber, services, how do you find them?
So,
and Todd, maybe just to add a little to that, thanks for bringing it up.
Yeah.
What I find is we can attract technical cyber talent, we can attract intelligence talent because we've got kind of a brand and a perception. But when it comes to marketing people, which is much more of a horizontal skill set, that doesn't help nearly as much. And it's a bigger challenge. And of course, you want the unicorn that's got great marketing expertise in whatever particular discipline with some cyber know-how. And it's just very challenging.
Well, Peter, your brand is so like Dungeons and Dragons. You should find some marketing folks that happen to have like D&D profiles.
Yeah. That's okay, but we really need them to understand cyber too.
Yeah.
well, so there's a couple points there I think that are interesting. One is, why do they have to be the top marketing person, right? I mean, maybe. I mean, you guys obviously have been able to raise a lot of money, and so you sold somebody on your concept to give you a ton of cash, right?
Yep.
And you got a lot of customers, so your marketing is doing something well. First of all, I think the second thing is, the ability for taking someone who knows security, and you think about most cyber security tools are purchased because someone trusts someone else, right? It's not because they've got the biggest budget. You spend $1 million at RSA, right? I mean, I could tell you numerous stories from folks that spent, $750,000 at conferences and ended up with 4 dinners, right? Like, it's not necessarily the best use of your marketing budget. What I also find is that folks in typical marketing roles, sometimes in the cybersecurity tool space, they apply traditional marketing strategies to this space and they fail. So I think, look, for you, my advice would be to kind of look at it from the perspective of like, where am I trying to take, the company and the brand? And do I need someone that has, maybe a little bit more of a niche background? I guess the last thing I would say for all of us, right, is like, we have the coolest job in the world, right? They make movies about what we do and TV shows about what we do, right? The news cycle is faster than what they can write in Hollywood. Friends of mine that are producers in Hollywood, they're like, there's not a lot of cyber shows because we can't keep up with the news cycle. The news cycle is faster than how we can write. So selling people on like how cool what we do is probably shouldn't be a hard thing. The challenge we have typically in cyber is that we don't know how to tell our stories well. So I would say, Peter, if you can find someone that can tell a really good story, whether they're in your organization or not, that's what I would look for, because you already have, you've got a good brand, people know who you are, you have the ability to convince people to buy your products. So, I think you should be able to find somebody that's looking to join your team.
Yeah,
Hope that helps.
maybe this is out of school, but my experience so far, which is limited at Drakos and in cyber, and I don't come from cyber. That's new to me for the last year and almost 2 years, is I can find terrific marketing talent. And I know people that are superb at digital marketing, demand gen, marketing automation, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. I don't find many people like that in cyber. That's kind of my dilemma.
Yeah, I think it comes down to the way cyber is sold and bought, right? Typically the way it's bought. It's really trusted. It's closed loop. It's friend to friend, right? Did you have success with this before? Are they solving really good problems? Do I trust the people behind the technology and the intelligence that's feeding the product?
Yep.
The marketing side of it is very challenging from turning an opportunity into a sale. Now, from a marketing standpoint, building your brand and telling that story, absolutely. But converting that into a sale, it gets very personal very quickly because for most cyber practitioners, they're looking at the marathon sale as opposed to the quick hit. So when you start to build your funnel and you're looking at all you're qualifying all your opportunities, right? It's going to come down to the relationship with that salesperson and the buyer, not the brand. In fact, sorry, hey Chris.
No, I was just going to, Andy. I was just going to chime in on that. I would, having been in the space, working at Tenable and done now back in the government. I'm driving in the car one day and I hear one of the bigger security firms with a radio commercial on. And I was like, oh, come on, radio. Like you kind of lost me there. It's like all of a sudden you went lowbrow. Like you just started advertising to the masses. Who even understands what it is that you do? I mean, I couldn't agree with Andy more. The security side of it really is, that inside track where it's boutique.
I have found that.
Okay,
Absolutely. I have also found that it follows like enterprise versus consumer sales too. So at the enterprise level, it probably couldn't be more high touch, warm intro, right? Relationship based. But we did, as I mentioned, we had made the software and user experience and helped out with the marketing, did the branding for ID Agent and Dark Web ID. Kevin, when he was starting with Dark Web ID, and he had just the fire hose of compromised email and passwords on the internet. And we made a whole dashboard to analyze it, really turnkey. He went to a conference and he had a demo for managed services providers to show how easy it was for them to just add all of their clients' URLs. And then it just monitored and showed them if there were any occurrences on the dark web and then they could alert. So it was a very turnkey, proactive monitoring tool for compromises of email password on the dark web. So it was kind of very consumer, turnkey, and plugged in well to managed services. And he hit a managed services conference. That's one of the biggest successes I've seen across any industry of getting a lot of clients at once. So there is, if you hit the right kind of audience, the right conference, and you've got something that looks turnkey, I've seen some real success as far as marketing with some quick turnaround sales, basically not high touch sales. So there's some shining stars out there, but I think it's more in turnkey product where, in this mix, there's product companies and a lot of us are services companies, which no matter what, you can't get away from a high touch, sale and a longer service.
I was just curious, Andy, I know we talked a little bit about this the other night when we synced with Dr. Allen, because he has, such an impressive background. You've written books and you also were head of cyber at Liberty University. I would love to hear your perspective, also coming from working with students and understanding like what they understand the pathway is and how, because you always hear students say, they've gotten this degree and then they can't get a job. You hear about the zero cybersecurity, there's no unemployment in it, but then they can't get a job. So I think that's probably something that would be really good to hear your opinion on.
Yeah, no, I think it's interesting. and I agree with you. We do sometimes find students that are struggling to get a job. And really, I think what it comes down to is, lack of soft skills. And I've heard it said best by some of the employers that would come to our university and recruit. Look, I don't need, and I believe in this, I don't need someone to come with a particular technical skill. I can teach that. What I can't teach is the soft skills side of it. And you either have it or you don't. You need to have it before you come, because I can't really teach that. Now, I believe that people evolve in their soft skills over time, but that's really the linchpin there. Look, I think we have to recognize something else as well, looking from an academic point of view. Like you said, I spent 3 years in academia and really got a good view of that. And NSA, we were in NSA Center of Excellence, and NSA, Ms. Janicek, a couple years ago at a leadership conference for all of the CAEs, all of the Centers of Academic Excellence, so all the deans and presidents were there. And they released a report that I believe IBM had a big hand in. And it was a survey done across all industry. And it said something very controversial. It said that the average college student leaves college 3 years behind. They hit the field 3 years behind. And I had to sit there, at my table and soak it in. And I thought, you know what, I can believe that. It happens for a number of reasons. The professors, number one, are probably 3 years behind. I mean, think about it. And the field is just moving so quickly that it's impossible to put a curriculum in place that's not 3 years behind, because a lot of those curriculum turn over about once every 3 years. And so it's just a fact, and we need to get used to the fact that these students are going to hit the workforce 3 years behind. Okay, now what? And again, I think it's really not, the key is the critical thinking and the soft skills. They need those so that they fit into our team and can be effective. And another thing I would mention is we need people from other fields to solve problems. I noticed Peter said that he came from another field. Hey, that's spot on. We need more of that. Even when we talk about diversity, we need diversity in the field of people from outside of the field. We need people who are problem solvers in other areas. We need attorneys. We need psychologists. We need business experts. We need economists. One of my key engineers is a threat hunter, and that's pretty technical stuff. And he doesn't have a technical background. He's an economist. I spoke to him the other day, asked him what he liked to do during his free time. He's reading economy books. But when you put him behind a keyboard, he's ferocious. And but he looks at the problem from a different perspective, and that's the key to success in building a team that can really be dynamic in its problem solving.
Yeah. You gotta let it come to you as it can, right? Because you never know. I mean, I've had folks that are art majors that are just insane, on the keyboard. Yeah. They don't have a degree, and so Dave, I see you've got your hand raised there. You have any more thoughts on this, or you have a different question?
No, thanks, Andy. I hand down now, or someone else can. Let's see here. So my first question, Andy, is your role, before I ask my question, is your role at Ciena more focused on Ciena's cyber risk or your clients, or maybe both?
I think it's all shared at this point, right? I guess it's Ciena's cyber risk, but I mean, the products that we build, the software that we write, right, goes into all major web scalers and the backbone of the internet. So from my standpoint, it's do my part in terms of the shared ecosystem.
No, absolutely.
Yeah. I'd like to add a comment there. I think SolarWinds taught us that there is really no difference, right? The back office is the front office is the client office now.
Well, I wasn't sure if you were the CISO for your clients, working on there for them, or your company CISO. Do you clarify?
Yeah, no, I'm not. I mean, I guess I'm customer facing in the sense that I interact with the other security teams for the greater good. And but
I was very interested in your comment about cyber needing to be seen as more of a business risk and not a technology risk. And I'm curious. To whom do you report in your company?
I report into the CFO.
CFO.
Yeah.
And so, which is good. And I think that's probably, I'm sure you would agree that that's probably helps you be seen more as a business advisor to the organization versus as a technical advisor, or a technology leader. I assume then that you're probably your CIO and you are our colleagues are probably equals in the organization. What is your opinion about how important that is? I imagine that many of the CISOs in the room today probably report to, or maybe even are, also the CIO in their organization. What's your perspective on sort of that role and the importance of where the CISO reports and how it's seen as a business risk advisor versus a technology risk advisor?
Yeah, I mean, we always say there's kind of like big C's and little C's, right? Depending on where you are in the organization and if you have a seat at the table. I think, for me, one of the things I try to do is just continue to translate what we do in business terms. We've actually deployed some financial modeling around cyber risk. So I can talk in terms of exposure and control, risk reduction. And this is a whole nother topic. We could spend hours on how we do that. But I think what it does is it enables, regardless of where you sit, right? It enables, a conversation that's really around risk. And, for us to get anything done, in our space in terms of transformation and projects and investment, like regardless of who you're working for, you've got to be able to voice that business case regardless. I've worked under CIOs, I work under the CFO now. Sometimes there's a cultural shift by making that happen, but at the end of the day, you still have to get, the marketing out there, your voice heard. Like you run a startup basically, right? You're running a business within a business. So probably more than other groups in the company, I think having a strong communications team, strong finance team, all factor in. So because you've got to be cross-functional. Now I do think, the biggest driver, I think, in long-term to reporting will be from boards. There's a big shift in the, there's some work being done with the World Economic Forum, PwC, ISA, and there's one other group, but they're focusing on, and the National Association of Corporate Board of Directors, of how do we drive reporting from the board level? What do they need to measure cyber and the effectiveness of cyber programs so they can be informed? And one of the main, there's like 5 principles to that work that's happening right now. And one of them is economic impact, right? How do you qualify and quantify the economic impact of a cyber event to the board and have it ongoing? So I think that's going to be a big shift, regardless of where we sit as a function, is our ability to translate, move from talking about vulnerabilities and incidents, right, and threats to, if we've got this much millions of dollars in exposure. If we implement this control with this percentage of implementation, I can reduce our exposure by this many millions for $1 million or whatever, right? Like, and that's a very different conversation. So I think regardless of where you sit, that's what I would focus on is how can I drive change from where I sit, and how can I communicate to the board in business terms that they can understand and make risk decisions. If you think about where this shift can go and why it matters, a lot of times there's a lot of scrutiny on the CISO for, we're coming too heavy with metrics that don't make any sense. The vendor community spits things out. Their tools talk about like scores. Well, what's your score mean? What's your letter or grade mean? Like I have to then translate all of that to try to make it meaningful, and it's very difficult. So
say something, Chris, to that.
Oh, I would love to talk about this for hours. The Department of Defense is notorious for coming up with scorecards and reports, right? They're all over the place. We have our, and now we're doing this, and we have these top 10 cybersecurity metrics. Now we're looking at it in terms of weapon systems, and 82% is green. Well, what does 83% mean? So we came up with this cyber commander's dashboard based on a lot of other principles, sort of at the 06 level to look at it. And the scoring metric was interesting. They sort of came up on a FICO kind of premise, 0 to 800, which was great. And now we're debating, like, what does 600 mean? Does 600 mean you should be able to go on deployment? Does 200 mean you shouldn't leave the pier? right? Does 250 mean the captain's been relieved because it's the equivalent of failing a engineering inspection, right? So to Andy's point, there's no stratification. So what we're trying to do now at the CISO level, and now that they've created these new principal cyber advisor positions within the Department of Defense, we're trying to articulate what does it mean to leadership? Because again, we buy cyber by the pound. 82 is better than 81. Nobody's able to make decisions based on this because, again, when you get into the risk equation, and one of the things that I would say for the cybersecurity world inside the Department of Defense, which is different than the commercial world, risk is a factor of, am I going to lose customers or product or market share or be sued for something? Risk on our side is something going to work? Are people going to die? I'm going to be able to deliver lethality against our adversaries. So when we came up with and I hate this term in the military, so the Chief Information Security Officer in the DoD, I hate that term. But I also hate the way that in the private sector, you guys have taken the word attack away from us. Everything's an attack. Well, no, an attack has a very specific definition. Not everything's an attack, but we call everything an attack because in the DoD, that would mean you've tripped rules of engagement. There's a response, there's a whatever. So we've chosen each other's words interchangeably. They don't necessarily fit in each other's ecosystems. And in the terms of risk and risk acceptance and risk mitigation, again, we have to make decisions that are predicated on taking lives or saving lives, not gaining customers or losing business share, right? And it's a little bit different of a model.
Yeah, so Chris, I love that conversation, right? Because I think when you do that, you lose credibility on both sides, right? And so that's why we're trying to make it a very executive conversation, right? All the generals, right? Everyone in the DoD, they still manage a budget and they manage risk, right? And they've got to be able to have those levers to understand, if I pull this lever a little bit, what am I going to get out of it? And make that conversation. I'd love to share with you what I've been doing. We've been way too long since we caught up, but I'd love to share what we're doing just internally because I think it's fun. And if you think about this conversation happening 2 or 3 or 5 years ago, it would never happen, right? So I think when you start talking about attracting, retaining, and growing teams and skill gaps, right? This is the next generation of skills we've got to plan for, right? This business-minded, cyber executive. That people that are coming out of school that are focused on getting certs and being really technical, there's this evolution that they at least need to have in the back of their mind and appreciate the same way we have to appreciate the technical skills, is that nothing's going to be zero risk. Not 100% of things aren't going to get funded to do, right? And so there's this concept of focusing on these growth areas. And these are all development opportunities for people. And quite frankly, some of the innovative things we're doing around risk quantification, I'm using those to attract talent. Hey, have you know anyone else doing this? You're like, no. We'll come over here. This would be kind of fun to do. We'll be the first ones in the world to do it for the supply chain, right? And they're like, oh, that's cool, right?
So Petter, I just wanted to bring up Petter from BAE. I've just known you for a long time, so I know a little bit of your background, and you've, I don't even know how many people are under you, but I'd be curious to hear how you have found talent, and is it typically coming from a college, or is it ranging from someone who already has experience, or is it a combination of that?
Well, I think talent is, it's a slightly different twist. My years of Silicon Valley was finding that brilliant thinker. Out here in the defense world, as much as I want to find that brilliant thinker coming out of school, they often have to have clearances and 15 years of service and cost like a college kid, and we get through this knothole. And so a lot of times what we're having to do is find talent that can meet a qualification, and then we augment the training to be able to achieve kind of the goal. I think also to kind of the conversation that Chris was bringing up, I think there's still too much that's the bureaucratic side that we're being asked to answer, as opposed to getting to that point of how do we really go and ensure that the mission can be carried out, as opposed to I filled out thousands of pages of paperwork. And so I think you get a blend of people wanting to come in for the mission. What I will tell you, though, is the attractive side is when we can be having those areas of the programs. And I've got now 3,500 people on contract that we're doing work on, and probably about a quarter of those are kind of cyber or high-end IT with high assurance areas. where you can get closer to the mission, I think that's where you really find the passions of the individuals. And I think that's what, especially in the government, the dollars aren't always as high as in the commercial world for the talent. But if you can have a purpose and kind of as was being spoken about, cyber isn't just a scorecard and gee, you lost a shopper in your shopping cart. You've got a credit card leak, but really you assured that a mission was carried out. You're able to make sure that the data was timely. I think those are the places where we look, is really tying people to having something that's greater than all of us as a part of it. That really, everybody wants to have that purpose and that impact, and that's really where we go and try and help present that marketing, that brand of, with us. Not only will we help you to continuously grow yourself, but we can really connect you with something to where what you do will matter.
Yeah, and I think that's a great point, right? I mean, when I talk about recruiting, I'm always talking about like we talk about passion, heart, and drive. Like we want PhDs, right? It doesn't matter if you've got, the cert or whatever. And I think being close to the threat as possible and close to that is like the biggest attraction, and it's also the one thing that is hardest to find. SolarWinds is a good example, right? Around, you can talk about really sophisticated nation state attacks, and in our community, we all know what that is. We all know what it looks like. We faced it, intimately in our day job. But how do you convince a CEO or another executive that that's what it looks like, right? When you're in the boardroom, how do you actually give the example of what it is, right? That's a really great one. All of you get to see that. So when you're attracting talent, right, you're going after folks that actually have that background and or are exposing people to that threat that most people don't get. And so I'm sure for you, retaining talent once they hit a certain level of expertise and visibility into that threat becomes a really tough challenge, because there's folks like me saying, I need people that have that visibility because I know exactly the threats we're facing and how to defend against it, but I need people that know what it looks like too, right? So that's a constant battle, I think, between private sector and the defense or the government, right? Is retaining talent close to that threat as possible, and having vehicles that it can then eventually go back out into the private sector to defend critical infrastructure in a different way, because we're all leveraging that shared infrastructure, but tough challenge you're facing there.
Yeah, I didn't create. I came to Drakos a year and a half, a little more than a year and a half ago. I didn't create it. The founders came out of the NSA. Our mission, if you hadn't heard it, is actually safeguarding civilization, and we're focused on industrial cybersecurity. That's our 100% focus. And I couldn't have created it on my own, anybody, but it is such a terrific intersection of kind of high level mission, community oriented mission with kind of individual opportunity to excel, that it draws in terrific people. And our culture is one of everybody kind of contributing, signed up for the mission. It provides motivation stuff. I could never have designed it. And I don't know how I would do it if I created a new company. I just, knock on wood, I feel fortunate to have fallen into this at Drakos. And I give all the credit to Rob Lee, John Lavender, just the guys who created the company. It's becoming a more and more powerful attraction for everybody across the area, even in the marketing role, because there's so many people, as I think Andy and Pedar are saying, who really aspire to contribute to the greater good, but there's no real mechanism, especially in many of the commercial organizations I've been in. The connection was too far removed. At Drakos, it's pretty direct. We're helping water facilities like Oldsmar, Florida, manufacturing companies, your electric utility, the foundations of kind of our civilization, keep it up and running. And I'm just lucky. I don't have any wisdom there to offer, but if you can find a way to kind of provide that.
Brock got his hands up. Maybe he's got some he can impart on us. Brock, you got something you want to share? I know your hand up.
Yeah, I run a non-traditional small government contractor. Actually started my business 6 years ago to be a staffing firm, and that was my background. And I think that's something that I've recognized, and I graduated in 2010 from JMU. Since being in the IT industry, especially in Washington, D.C. area, is the cultural change of talent looking for instant gratification or growth. And the traditional models, it used to be just you get a job, you do your job well, you're interested in the mission. And the new type of a lot of engineering talent is looking for an instant gratification or opportunity to really rise up and be recognized for their work. And that's something that the government contracting world really struggles with. And quite frankly, I changed my model from a contract to hire to a just subcontracting role. And I've been able to find better talent for my prime contractors because we put them on billable work, but we give them, we tell the customer, like, we need this person to be stimulated with some sort of IRAD or innovation or ability to do more than what just the contract requires. And that's how I get my people. Every single engineer that I hire now has that opportunity. And we have to sell it to our customer too, but it's in the customer's best interest to give a little bit of freedom to be able to explore what's possible and make themselves better. Because without that, you're just like everybody else. So I just wanted to mention that's just something I've noticed is the instant gratification, and it's not going away.
Yeah, thanks for that. Jason?
Yeah, actually, I think what Brock's saying is exactly right. I'm the chief management officer of a GovCon company here in Arlington, but I came up through the communication side of the house, both in the Pentagon and then in the private sector. And so I think one of the things that it's important to note, and so before this, I was leading communications for the trade association that represents the aerospace and defense industry. And the problem that we're talking about is nothing new. It's not just us. And so I've had to learn the CISO world and the IT world because it's not my native world, but the challenges that we would advocate for there are so similar to what we're facing here because there is just an ever shrinking pool of STEM talent. And to Brock's point, the attraction for instant gratification goes a lot towards what we'll call the more Silicon Valley based companies. And so getting folks here in DC, whether it's into our jobs, I was doing the same thing. We were pushing inside the Pentagon to recruit the same talent. It's that only niche area that the one place you can do some of the high end things that you might actually think are pretty dang cool. The only place you can do that is here. You can't do that outside. And it's the same what we were saying, even inside aerospace and defense, that you can go engineer a lot of really cool things across the world, but the opportunity to work on some really specific platforms, specific threats, specific areas is here in DC, and it is in these kind of companies or inside the government. And so there is that niche sweet spot in communications and how you recruit, retain this exact population we're talking about.
Data is king, right? In a lot of those, areas, right? Because, if you think about the telecommunications infrastructure, right, that's where the battlefield is, fought, right? And so that's a completely different ballgame. But I know, Gerald, I think you had your hand up.
Yeah, thanks. Sorry I was running late. Just one of the joys of life when you have 17 things going on at the same time. Nice to meet y'all, and known Kim for years and love what you guys are doing. I've been lucky. I've been both on the government side and in the commercial side. Now I find myself building a risk quantification products with dollars associated with them. And when you talk about the challenge of finding resources, we have the challenge of finding the unicorn within a pile of unicorns that exists in a unicorn planet. And so we struggled for a long time with how do you find somebody who is the perfect person. And what we found is obviously they don't exist. So we started looking at, we said, look, we can't find somebody with all the background. We can't find the PhD mathematician with cyber who's actually done this before. And so we said, well, look, how do we, instead of building a person, build a team? So now what we end up doing is creating like a Venn diagram of people. And we have a data scientist. So some of our data teams actually came out of academia working on PhD in like flow manufacturing, something like this. I forget exactly what it was. We applied him with some people who knew cybersecurity well and some other folks who understood the business well. And mind you, we did this internationally as well too. So we have teams across Europe doing this. And I think the better we can build that, I think that we have to, especially with COVID, right? We're all at home. You guys with the great backgrounds are lying because you don't live in that house with the perfect red fireplace in the background. But when you're working at home, I think what this has given us the opportunity to do is take the Venn diagrams of where we build our teams from, spread them out, and shoot for 80%. 80% is not a bad thing. 80% is better than 0%. Because I always struggled with finding the right talent. And we found that if somebody said this, we don't lack for cybersecurity people, we lack for the unicorn we're after. And I think sometimes we have to look at, can I build the solution to what I'm after with 2 people or 3 people? And then not only does that, like you just described, give people the ability to grow and learn something new, it gives them the ability to collaborate and work with other people. That's the only way we've been able to solve some problems as well, too. So you have to get anti-traditional, I guess.
Yeah, and I think the last thing I would add to that, and we're kind of pushing up on time, so I don't want to be mindful. I don't want to, Kim, you can tell me if we can stay on or not, but you know, I think the biggest thing is you start to bring the, you know, folks together that have all different varied backgrounds. The number one, the glue to all of it outside of mission is check your ego at the door, right? There's no room for ego, right? This is all about what we're trying to accomplish. Everyone's point of view is valid. Bring it to the table. Let's hear it out and let's move on, right? Like you can't, there's no ego allowed. That's like the biggest rule.
Yeah. You know what I think would be kind of fun, and also I'm the same. If ever, anyone has to drop off, because we did say till 5:30, we understand we don't have to end right now. But I just think it would be interesting to hear even just a quick from whoever feels comfortable saying it. Like what advice would you give a new student coming out of college, even at getting their master's degree, trying to get a job? Like what would you most encourage them to do? So if anyone wants to start.
I mean, I'll make a comment. I just did a thing on Saturday with 16 cyber grads. And I was shocked that when I said that you have to have a lab on your own, like, cause they asked me, what is the number one thing we can do to like make ourselves more attractive? And I had raised of hands, how many people have their own lab? And they didn't, like the majority of them didn't. And I was like, you go through 4 years of school, but you only do what the school's providing you. And we all know the best engineers, like the guy that I want to hire is the one that's playing with this at home on their free time. So to me, that would be the biggest piece of advice. And I told them every single one of them needs to go. They didn't even know where to get a VM. And I mean, these are JMU, I'm sorry, throwing JMU under the bus, but these are cyber grads, JMU, that are in their 4th year in a capstone project with us. And I'm like, you don't have a lab or a server and you don't have to do that. So that's my recommendation.
We get there with everything. That's one of our interview questions with web engineers. How many websites did you maintain during college? And they're like, you mean as a project? No, maintained during your 4 years in college. And some of them are like, oh man, that's, wow, a couple dozen maybe. Others are like, well, 0, right? And it's so telling.
Yeah.
You're absolutely right.
The other thing I could highly recommend is that they get into capture the flags. So there's an amazing competition at the collegiate level called CCDC. It's really hot in this particular area, you know, the DC area. But that's the number one way that the defense companies and contractors recruit is through that CCDC competition. And the more they get engaged at, the better. On the flip side, if companies want to recruit and pull in that talent, they should stand up their own capture the flag competitions and let these students self-identify, and you pick the winners, you know, the top 10 all get invitations for hire.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. If I could plug our subtenant, we have at Mindgrub, we have a couple of incubators, but at the Mind Hub, we have a company called Point 3. They've been doing really well, but their software is capture the flag, and they set those up for companies and run little mini tournaments. So something to look into.
Todd, if I could jump in. First of all, I wanted to say I agree with something that Andy said earlier, that you know, when you're recruiting, you know, we're just kind of borrowing each other's people. So, you know, our firm, we're an independent technology and cyber leadership and advisory firm, extremely independent. If you're looking for a new exciting opportunity, give me a call. But beyond that, I would say, you know, if you, and I don't mean to be too sarcastic with this, but I guess I am a little bit sarcastic with this comment. If you want to be one of 100, I would say be as technical as you possibly can in this field. If you want to be, you know, one of one, be as business centric as you can be. Learn as much about the industry you're applying for, and then once you land there, learn as much about the industry you're in as you possibly can. Because, you know, I agree with Andy. You know, the best thing we can do in this industry is not make it a technical industry, but make it a business risk industry. And the best way to do that is really to understand the business. It's amazing Rick Arthur's on my CISO in our company, and it's amazing the people we talk to who, they understand technology as CISOs and as cyber advisors, cyber leaders for the companies. They really don't understand the business, and therefore they don't understand the business risk that their companies are in. And I don't understand how you can be a cyber leader if you don't understand that. So my advice would be, first, understand your business, and the technology follows. But that's probably
Chris? I think
actually, Dave stole a lot of the thunder. I was going to make a similar comment about how it's
Sorry, Chris.
It's not all about technology. Look, I was a history major. I majored in graduation when I was in college with a minor in history, and now found my way to be, the senior cyber advisor for the Department of the Navy. I came, nobody would have guessed I came from that path. I'm not a keyboard guy. I'm not a ones and zeros guy. But for the Department of Defense and the Navy, the warfare applications of what we're trying to do, right? That's probably a strong suit for mine. And it's not, and then depending on where you've fallen in on the stack, right? I mean, when we figure out what cybersecurity is, as we're watching through this, there's so many different ways into the community, and you don't have to necessarily always know the IP stack to be successful in this community. Somebody who just understands what that is and can translate that to somebody who has no idea what it is every bit as important as a guy who's going to be on a keyboard. So I also wouldn't discourage people from getting into cybersecurity because they don't have a cyber background. There's so many avenues.
Big industry.
Yeah, Gerald, to your point, exactly, right? It's that combination of those 3 or 4 people that make up that Venn diagram of we all kind of cover down on one another. We create this thing in the aggregate. And that's what teams of teams are, right? I mean, that's what this is all about. And of course, the military gravitates to that, right? It's all about from a team perspective. Yeah, I wouldn't discourage anybody from trying to get into this just because they're not technical.
So the one thing, mine is simpler actually. Mine is don't be afraid to fail. Like I see too many people worried about, oh my goodness, I'm going to make the wrong decision. I promise everybody I ever talk to that you're going to fail. You're going to fail more times than you like. It's going to be painful. And I promise that's the best way to grow. I think if we try and tell people that they can get it right coming right out of college, we're not doing our job. I haven't gotten it right and I'm not 25 anymore. So I'm still trying to figure out how to get it right on a daily basis. I think we need to encourage people to, and this is the Silicon Valley thing, failure is not a bad thing, right? Failure is not a bad thing. And I think if we can help people who failed, look, you failed, you learned a way not to do something. Right? Thomas Edison failed 177 times building the light bulb or something, and he got it right 178th time. Great, you're a technical person? Good.
Fail forward. So when you fall, just fall forward, not back.
And fail fast.
And I think this is where it comes to, getting something simpler. I feel like too many of these folks that I'm talking to as they're entering the market are trying to fit themselves into a role, as opposed to knowing what they're passionate about and not spending some time into what's going to motivate them to kind of like the comment of Brock of, if you want to be in cyber and you haven't been ripping things apart and trying to figure out how to do it, it's like, why are you trying to be in cyber? Because you're not going to get to the nth degree if you don't do that. And, I sit there and I live in too much PowerPoint, but I'm ripping IoT apart at my home all the time just because I'm like, you can't help myself. And that's what I've done for 30 years in cyber is, figuring things out. And I think that's where there's a lot of them that haven't really thought about what's going to get you to be able to do the 24 hours when you got to stay up and stay on mission, and feel like you go home and you got something done, as opposed to complain about why it was longer than 8 hours. And I think that's really where a lot of them need to look at what's motivating them, because the jobs are endless. They'll find there's 100 variations of a cyber job.
But the jobs are endless and they're changing, right? I think that's the other thing we mistake is the job. Like I came out of college 20 years ago, whatever it was. And what I did then doesn't exist now. As a software developer, I sat for one thing. It never changed. What I do today, I could never have mapped my path from here to there, right? I mean, kind of took like a sawtooth curve, right? Some days I was doing really good. Some days I was doing really poorly. I think that constant learning is the trait that defines success. Constant learning and then the ability to try and fail is the keys you look for. If we can, I teach everybody who'll listen. I'm like a bad preacher on a soapbox. If I can get people to learn just that, they win. Because I can't promise them outcomes. Nobody can promise you an outcome.
It's also important that people
guys,
learn to
I have
teach
to jump.
themselves.
I just want to say I really enjoyed it. just Andy, I wanted to say goodbye before I fall off, and you and I will link up here shortly. And thank you for that super cool wooden box with the cheese and the wine in it.
Yeah, we have our marketing person Jen to thank for that. She found it, and it what I love is the proceeds from buying it goes to One Hope, which is like so it all kind of like everyone wins.
Yeah.
I like that part.
Yep. Thank you, Todd. Thanks, Kim. That was awesome.
Yeah.
Rick,
Thank you, gentlemen. Peter, Chris.
What's that?
I was just thanking everybody.
Yeah. Thank you, everyone. I could go on. Jen, did you want to mention anything? I love that we're the only 2 women here.
Oh, who, me, Jennifer Taylor?
Yeah.
You know, I am not a cyber expert. I do not work in the cyber industry, but when I wrote down an answer to what I would say to someone coming into the workforce today in any field. And what I would say to them is, you know, get on the bus and stay on the bus. That's what my dad said. Get on, learn, network, find somebody that can help guide you. You never know what next job is going to present itself. My career has been a complete zigzag. I started in marketing. Back in the late 80s, marketing was an integrated campaign with print, radio, and, you know, television, maybe some direct mail. And, you know, marketing is so different today. So what I would say to people is, you know, get on the bus, start at a company, learn, be a continuous learner, know how to work in teams, be a good listener, you know, and do, you know, do 360s, have people give you feedback. I had somebody say to me once, Jennifer, leaders embrace feedback. You may not like what you hear.
Painful, but you got to do it, right?
But you got to process it and decide what you're going to take and what what you're going to learn. And those are, you know, my career has been rewarding because of the people I've surrounded around myself. So that's all I would say.
No, thank you. Thank you so much. And thanks for joining, Jennifer.
Yeah, this is really insightful for me. Thanks.
Yeah, any final parting word, Andy? And then I think we can all adjourn.
Listen, I appreciate your commitment to having an interest in leading people, right? It's a privilege that we have as leaders to, you know, people trust us with their livelihood, their family's livelihood, and, you know, so appreciate your commitment to it. And thank you for spending the time with me, you know, for the last hour and 15 minutes, and hopefully you got some value out of it. Feel free to ping me anytime, LinkedIn, I can send you a note. Kim has my info, but I'm glad to catch up with all of you separately at any point. So thanks for joining.
Thank you, Andy. Thank you so much.
Thank you, everyone. Good to see you all.
Great to see everybody.
Thanks, Kim.
Thanks for
Stay
joining.
safe.
Thank you.
Have a great night. Bye-bye.
Bye.